Hello and welcome to the Womb-Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar and I have Ruby May with me here today. Thank you, Ruby, for joining us on the podcast. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about you. I've been so inspired. I've been following you on social media for a little while, and I love reading what you write there and what you share there, and programs that you share about and things like that. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your womb-centered healing journey. I would love for you to introduce yourself a little more and share about that. What's inspiring to you today? How have you developed your, grown through womb-centered healing over the time that you've been focusing on that?
Hey, thank you. It's really exciting to connect with you. I feel like I'm very connected to, I work quite locally and I travel a little bit, but it's really exciting to build bridges. And I'm sensing such a big wave and emergence of womb-related leadership, and it just really coming up as a topic. And so it's really beautiful to connect. I don't even know where you are right now.
I'm in Northern California.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm sitting here in Berlin. I'm British,
okay.
But I've lived in Berlin for nearly 10 years. And yeah, you asked me to introduce myself, so I will share a little bit about my journey and how I got into womb-centered healing, or my connection to the womb in my work. So my background is working actually more with sexuality, and it's always been funny when people have referred to me as, oh, Ruby, that's the woman who works with sexuality, because it feels like my interest in that topic is because it connects with so many different facets of being a human being, and it's actually very little to do with sex. And on that journey of facilitating group spaces to kind of explore our relationship to Eros, I became really fascinated in the dynamic between men and women, and I became really interested in the different ways that we can relate in an intimate encounter together, and what it looks like if a woman really takes leadership in an erotic encounter. And it feels like we don't really have many role models or good examples of that, and we're kind of stumbling along trying to find our way. And then sometimes we have these strong pictures of like a dominatrix or something, as this is what a woman could look like when she's fully in control of an encounter. And when I experimented in my own private life, I realized that there's certain kinds of leadership that just feel like I'm putting on a glove that doesn't fit me. I don't feel comfortable in my own skin. I don't feel in flow, or like I'm really, I don't feel in flow. And so this kind of inspired the question in me, what is perhaps like feminine leadership? Is there a way that, as someone with a female body who identifies as a woman, is there sort of ways of relating to the world and ways of showing up and ways of leading that might be different because I have a female body? And so rather than, of course I did read books and listen to people and, things like this, but my pathway was to kind of look at, well, what if we can learn about that through studying our own bodies and through connecting with the womb? And what if the womb can reveal different qualities of the feminine? And so I studied with the Red School. I don't know if you've heard of the Red School.
I have. In fact, I just interviewed Alexandra Pope.
Oh, you did? Oh, how wonderful.
About their program on menopause.
Yeah. I saw that. Yeah. So they are two teachers, Alexandra Pope and Shawnee Wurlitzer Hugo, who I found very inspiring in my journey. They wrote a book called Wild Power, and I did their mentorship program. And so over 6 months, this was some years ago, I was kind of apprenticed by my own womb. And I also remember like how I first heard about this offering that they were sharing with the world, and I received the invitation in my email inbox, and I remember like sensing the place where it was from. It just felt like the source of this invitation was from such a deep and soulful and connected and aligned, and that it had just like, there was something in the timing of it, like it had just stated enough to then sort of be born into the world. And I had such a full body yes to train with them and go on this journey. And so that for me was also a kind of a teaching on using the womb for creativity as well, and like and using the womb for aligning our creativity. So this has been my catalyst for the journey that I'm on today. And after doing this practice of cycle tracking and this sort of amazing healing that it offered me on all levels, earlier this year, I started to feel ready to start offering this work in a kind of mentorship program with other women. And my interest, like my sort of little niche in it that I'm honing in on, is really this link between connecting to our wombs and living cyclically, and the bridge between that and activism. So how does that relate to the bigger picture of what's happening in the world? And how, can we take it seriously that our relationship with ourselves and our bodies and coming into contact with our natural rhythms is creating a big shift on the planet. And that's like my passion, to sort of support women to start unpacking that on their journey and to raise awareness around that.
Beautiful. I'm so grateful to hear about that, because that, I feel that bridge of activism and applying our creative power to the changes that, and to creating a new society, rebirthing humanity and the world and how we relate with Mother Earth and all of that is so essential right now. And it's a big part of, it's central to the work that I'm doing. I feel like the only way we'll be able to birth a new society and a new way of being human and develop into a harmonious human potential where we're in harmony with ourselves, with each other, and with the planet. The only way that we're going to get there is by reestablishing the centrality of the womb and coming into full reverence and respect and honoring the rhythms of the womb and the rhythm, how that corresponds with the rhythms of the seasons and the ecology of the womb, and how that corresponds with the ecology of the whole planet and of humanity, and our ability to create new life, and how that informs and guides us to create new life, literally, not just new human beings, but a new way of life, a new way of living, a new way of being. And we have that capacity, and it's not just women in female bodies, it's people of all genders can connect to this womb energy through healing our relationship with our mothers, healing our relationship with our own sexuality and our own genitalia and our own gender, right? So all of that is central to our ability to create this new life we're all longing for, that's free of so much of the pain and suffering and trauma that we've been experiencing for millennia in this model of life that diminishes and suppresses sexuality, emotionality, all things feminine, and the womb. That's been a horrendously detrimental experiment on our part as human beings. But just like children who have to experience and experiment with doing things that are dangerous or cause harm to ourselves, and then realize, oh, that's not working, and then we have to learn how to do things differently, right? Yeah. So I'm so grateful to hear you talk about activism, and I'm very curious to hear more about that and how that got started for you. And I'd love to hear about any practical projects that you've gotten involved with where you've actually said, you know what, my womb creativity is generating this energy and nourishing a practical project that's creating change in the world. I'd love to hear about something like that.
Gosh, there's so much. There is. So I actually maybe would start by saying, when I started deeply connecting with my womb, I thought it would all be about creativity and manifesting, and actually what happened is the opposite. I went through a massive shedding process where everything that was not truly in integrity in my life fell to pieces. And I was confronted with how I had abandoned myself in the past and not stood for my needs. And so that was like quite an initiation for me, and I'm so grateful now. But it also was such a teaching, that this is the wisdom of the womb, no? That we need to allow things to die that are ready to die. We need to, feel the extent of the crisis that we're in. We need to allow ourselves to crack, and it's only through this that we can create the space and come into the deep inner listening and have the humility perhaps to create the right conditions for something new to be born.
Could you share a little bit, more detail about how that process happened for you? I just think it's really useful for listeners, because we can talk about allowing ourselves to crack and allowing things to fall apart and things falling apart in our lives, but having specific examples of things that I can share. I can break the ice with sharing how I stepped away from a multi-million-dollar property that my husband and I built over the course of 11 years. That it became clear that some of the basic foundational principles of that community and the leadership that was in place there was not supporting our further growth any longer. Right. And we left losing all of the years worth, 11 years worth of labor and financial investment that we made. We stood to inherit that property, and we stepped away from that and let all of that crumble, and had to leave that community in general because just stepping away from that didn't demonstrate to the community that we weren't aligned with some of the things in that organization that the whole rest of the community had been stepping away from for years. And so we had no longer a leg to stand on and had to completely move to a completely different area in the state. And that's the kind of crumbling of everything when it's not in integrity that I've experienced. Right. That's just one example of that in my life, where everything, the job falls away, and I didn't even mention that there were business opportunities that just started not working anymore there. So my financial base and my community base and my spiritual sanctuary, every aspect of my life just fell away. And then, I could go on and on with lists of times in my life, in my devotional way of life to inner guidance, it seems to magnify when that goes on and make it really strong. It's like, okay, you're really devoted to this. Well, then this has to go, and this has to go, and this has to go. And so I'm curious to hear your specific examples in your life of times when that just everything fell apart.
So I think it just started with losing my full body yeses for my creative projects. And then following that impulse that something wasn't quite aligning anymore, and making a big life change, moving to a different country, starting a new partnership, entering a new project, thinking my wildest dreams were coming true. And I was actually guided to this place through a vision that I had as I was bleeding. So I thought everything was aligned. I thought my wildest dreams were coming true. And it just became clear that I was fighting a battle in this dream life, and that there were some harsh lessons that I had created for myself that I needed to experience. And what I related to beforehand around standing for my own needs. So basically having to acknowledge that what felt like this beautiful dream come true and profound love affair, just listening to my body that was not happy, and my nervous system that was not happy, and asking, just really sensing that if my body is feeling so wound up and uptight, and it feels like such a pushing and a battle, it's not meant to be. And so that all ended, and my work as well, that had been very successful for years of running workshops, I'd chosen to end that as well. So I was left with a big wide open schedule and no plan and no idea what I was going to do, and a very sore heart. And so there were so many gifts in that as well, of course.
I'm curious about what you meant by full body yes, and how you started to notice that you weren't getting the full body yeses anymore. I know we're going backwards in the storytelling, but that's okay.
I really wanted to live my life as an experiment as to whether the things that I really invested time and energy into, that I just had this sense of, that when I was doing them, or when I was connecting to them, or when I received an invitation, that it kind of feels like my body lights up. It just feels like an internal, like, yes. I feel relaxed, I feel present, I feel engaged, I feel excited, as opposed to receiving an invitation or connecting to something that you're involved with and feeling a kind of slump in your energy, or a little contraction, or a little no. And so I was really wanting to living my life as an experiment. Can I be uncompromising in that and really commit myself to things that I get that full body yes for? And life is an ongoing experiment of always wanting to move towards being uncompromising with that, and of course having hiccups every now and again, but I fully trust that that's possible.
And so it sounds like you had the experience of not getting full body yeses anymore for what you were doing, and went and moved to a new town, started a new love affair, got things going. It was all full body yes, visions from your menstrual cycle, all of this, and then realizing, but wait a second, there's this full body no happening. right? When you thought there was a full body yes all along, and then suddenly you realize that there was this nervous system, anxiety. I hope I'm not putting the wrong words to what I heard you. Please correct me. But, and then realizing, oh my goodness, here it is. I'm facing this pattern, perhaps, and really being challenged in your devotion to this following of your full body yes, and seeing that, wow, where did it bring me? Here I am with this in a bigger way, perhaps, than ever before. Perhaps because it was such a big yes to begin with. It's so curious to me how that happens sometimes. How
it's a mystery to me as well, and I'm still harvesting the lessons from that. And yet, you know, always when you feel confused about why something happens, later on, you can see this sort of bigger picture and how everything is a stepping stone to where you are now. And so I learned so many valuable lessons that I'm so grateful for, and I'm so grateful for where I am today.
And so it sounds like
I kind of want to come back to your original.
Right. That's what I was going to do, is come back to that original question of, so how does this all translate into fuel for this womb-centered creative activism?
Let me find the right way in. Yeah, the womb is such a beautiful, like, map of how my understanding of creativity and activism, what it's made up of. And so I had this experience, kind of inspired by my womb. It all kicked off when I started connecting with my womb. But I had this experience of having to deeply, deeply confront myself and my patterns and what I was wanting to stand behind. And I had to really, really slow down. And I had to really admit to myself that I was burnt out and I needed to change my life, and I needed to come into a different rhythm. And so if you look at a kind of archetypal cycle, the second half of the cycle after ovulation is about that sort of bringing the awareness inside, right? It's about slowing down. It's about looking at what's perhaps not an integrity in your life. You know, as progesterone increases, we have this amazing superpower of being able to see, like, what needs addressing. And so yeah, this is like the one half of the cycle that I feel like I was really initiated in through that experience. And then of course, through that sort of journey of really meeting ourselves and really sort of stopping and coming into a deep listening and this sort of sense of like, fuck, I just don't get it. I just, like, I'm here, I don't know what's going on, speak to me, like, use me, like, you know, we come into this very humble, like, surrendered state, and it's in that state that we can receive guidance, that that life can really touch us, that we're permeable enough, no? Because, like, with all in my life beforehand, with all my running around and busyness and constant travel and teaching, I was too busy in the doing to really allow myself to be touched by life and to really sort of have the spaciousness to have that relationship with prayer and being in dialogue with life. And so it took sort of this experience of being deeply humbled and feeling quite broken by these experiences to allow life back in. That's what it felt like. And then it's from that place that then, you know, this archetypally the second half of the cycle, which is about coming back into the world, and our inspiration to sort of shine ourselves, our essence into the world, to make shit happen, to be creative, to be an activist out in the world. That you know, the cycle teaches us that we need that time of going within and slowing down and listening, so that our actions can be coming from a good place, and that we have the energy to sort of carry them out.
And so as you're, do you feel that you've emerged now into that place of being ready to come out into the world again from this, you know, because we have our monthly cycles where we have that early after menstruating, we have that, you know, building of the new egg, the new creation, and then the you know, evaluation, is this what needs to be aligned, what needs to work here, which is really important, right? Because if you are going to carry a project to fruition, you need to be refining things as you go, and then menstruating what doesn't work, right? Letting go of what doesn't work in the project, and then replenishing with that vital energy. So we have these monthly cycles, we have yearly cycles as well through the seasons, where there's more of that activation energy in the summertime, and more of that resting menstruation energy in the wintertime, for sure. And then we have these lifetime big, you know, cycles that last many years, right? Where we come to, you know, we have the big burst of, I got the guidance to go move to this new town and have this new information, relationship, and build this new life for myself. And then over years, we might discover, oh, it needs to be refined or even menstruated completely, and then reemerge. And so it sounds like you've been in this process and you've menstruated one version of your life, and perhaps you're moving into this new spring of life for yourself. And I'm curious what projects, what activisms you are feeling inspired and alive about now.
So your question is around what projects and creative So from that space of, I just remember February last year, I woke up on the new moon and I looked at my calendar and I had nothing in it I had one appointment in October. And that was it. And I was so excited, because that's literally never happened to me. I managed to have one appointment for the whole of the year in February. And so from that delicious space of like having a little bit of money saved up and having just no idea what I was going to do, I followed my flow and had a beautiful sort of recalibrating, replenishing journey to the Southern Hemisphere, and saw dear friends. And then from that place of beautiful spaciousness and sort of rest, I had this idea to create Know Your Flow. So that's my mentorship program that kind of explores the link between, I call it personal and planetary revolution. And then the one appointment I had in my calendar is a beautiful project called Sensing the Change, which we started, the previous year, connecting around. And it's basically very related to this, but slightly different. It's an initiative to bring together people who would describe themselves as activists in environmental, social, political, diverse fields, and people who work with the body and body intelligence. And the question is, like, what happens when you put these two groups of people in the same room together and you facilitate a process for them to inspire each other? And so we had our first event. We're about 50 people about 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, and we're planning a series of events, and that really feels like it's tapping into something of, you know, very zeitgeisty, like a movement, rather than just one event.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So this Know Your Flow program is a mentorship program that you're facilitating, and can you share a little bit more about that? Is that about knowing your menstrual flow, your feminine flow, your creative flow?
So all of it, but through the menstrual cycle. Yeah. So basically, I designed a program for people like me who are a bit rubbish at doing online programs. And so basically, there are a series of videos. I introduced the practice of cycle tracking, which is that every day you're aware of what day of your cycle you're on, and you just write down a few words based on how you're feeling. And then we go on a 13-week journey where every week you get sent a little reminder to watch a video, and you choose what video you watch based on where you are in your cycle. So if you're in like your pre-ovulatory spring, you know, there are 3 different spring-related videos that you can watch with a kind of inquiry and a kind of, you know, an invitation to look at your week and your experience of being alive through that particular angle this week. And then we have calls every 2 weeks. And then I send you text messages to your phone twice a week just to give you little reminders to stay on track. And so my vision is that we kind of transition from this mentorship program to a collective of women who are really interested in kind of womb-inspired or womb-centered leadership. And so it's starting, the first group graduated a while ago, and they're starting to host their own calls, and it's starting to kind of really have its momentum independently of me, which I'm really delighted about.
Lovely. And so what makes this program like easier for people who are, as you say, rubbish at online programs? What makes it like the program that you would enjoy participating in and be able to follow and do well with?
Well, I think because it's not so much that it takes lots of time. It doesn't. No, you know, so many of us are busy. We don't have a lot of time. But it's really through watching a video, which is 10 to 15 minutes long once a week, it's really giving you an invitation to shift your awareness. So it's not so much about being time consuming, it's about shifting your awareness. It's about including your body and where you are in your cycle in your day-to-day life. And I think the little text messages and the sense of like community that we're creating together, because we have sharings, and you know, the sense of like really being part of something, it's small enough that people really get to know each other, and you know, it doesn't feel anonymous, it feels quite intimate, and like we're all holding each other, and there's beautiful processes and sharings happening where people are making really courageous steps in their life through the sense of being supported in this circle. So yeah, I think it's something around the sort of intimate size. We're between 30 and 40 people, and the sort of the intimacy of getting messages on your phone, and the focus on awareness rather than, you know, length of time doing things.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And so are you weaving this together with that other program that you were talking about, where they're bringing body-centered practitioners, you're bringing body-centered practitioners and activists together in the same room for a series of events that is building to a movement? Are you bringing...
Yeah, I mean, it feels like Know Your Flow imbues all of my life, constantly. Also just in a big part of my healing journey with my womb has been around, maybe you could call it information cycles. And so it's realizing through sort of connecting more and more with my body and the different sensations in my body, starting to notice the sense of feeling overstimulated, and realizing that ideally what happens is we receive an input or information from the world, and if we have a kind of relaxed body and open nervous system, that information sort of travels inside, and then we metabolize it, right? There's a kind of like integrating of that information, and then there's a response, and that completes this information cycle. However, if we're constantly overstimulated, or we have a lot of tension, or we have trauma, and that information it's not completing its cycle, and so we start feeling frazzled, and we have the tendency, I see this everywhere, to just do too much and not integrate enough. So we're not completing these cycles of experience. And as a workshop facilitator, I also see a lot of people going to a lot of workshops, absorbing all this information, all these experiences, and not taking the time to really let it settle and digest and embody it and complete that cycle. Mm-hmm. And so, the way that I would sort of design a workshop and the pace at which I would curate an experience for people, and the attention given to integrating during and afterwards is completely different now, thanks to my understanding of my womb and how life is cyclical. And then, of course, I think, I just love the way that understanding how the womb works is fascinating, regardless of what gender you identify as, because it's such a beautiful blueprint of creativity that we all have an innate access to. And so to demonstrate, to do kind of guided explorations, to explore our relationship to each part of the cycle, regardless of our gender, and then to sort of understand that link between the necessity for deep listening and allowing ourselves to be touched in order to put aligned, on fire place. Because what we're doing in sensing the change is really looking at what you could call the twin trail. I don't know if you've heard of this expression. The twin trail is this, what we've been talking about, this sort of pathway inside and this pathway into expression and action outside, and how the body just plays such a central role in that. Yeah.
Wow. So you're bringing this map that the womb provides for us of the creative process to the arena of activism. And when you were talking about what you've learned in your own experience of allowing that time for integration and full digestion and then response of new information and that deep listening, and how you're integrating that awareness into how you create experiences, offer experiences, support others to have this awareness as well. That just really brings me a lot of joy, because in my experience with activists, I've been involved in environmental activism. I used to be a participant in Earth First activism, especially here in California with the redwoods and clear cutting of forests and things like that. I was involved in various activist activities, and I always felt like it could use more of an awareness of how the activists are treating themselves, their own bodies, their own ecology, and are we really doing anything different if we're still in this domination model and this warlike or fighting model with our fellow human beings? And it sounds to me like you're bringing this inner awareness to this activism arena. And I've met since then many activists, modern day activists, that are becoming aware that that's not sustainable, that warlike model of activism, that fighting model of activism, that neglect your own needs and sacrifice your own well-being in order to, you know, meet the crisis at hand model is not sustainable for the long haul of social change and transformation that we need to engage in, right? We need to be fully resourced and replenish ourselves and deeply listen. And I love the name of your program of, what is it? Sensing the change, because, and I know for myself personally, if I'm deeply listening, if I'm giving myself the spaciousness in my life to feel and sense the way things are moving and the way my inner guidance is nudging me, then I can feel and see the direction things are going, and just point my nose in that direction, and I will be gently supported, and I can just surf that wave of change if I'm deeply listening. And then I'm not fighting to make it happen and wearing myself out. Instead, I am really listening. And when I'm really listening to my intuition, to my womb guidance, then I catch things much earlier on in the game that might be misaligned or might be heading off in a direction that, or might be dangerous, or, you know, I mean, I can tell you a long list of stories of having an intuition that, oh, this thing that I thought was really aligned that I was going to go to, I really need to cancel because it's not. And then learning later that, wow, it was a really good thing that I canceled that, right? And so just that deep listening seems like such an important thing for activists to really connect with and shift away from that warlike approach. And so I'd love to hear your reflections on that. I don't have a specific question. I'm just opening for reflection on that.
Yeah, I think well, first of all, just to reflect, you know, what you were saying, it's really exciting because it really feels like there is a collective awakening to the fact that it's not sustainable the way we've been doing it. And Extinction Rebellion, which I don't know, in England it's a very big thing. It originated in England now, and so they did this massive rebellion in October, and then they decided to rest and recalibrate and recharge, and it was just so beautiful. I'm not a member of Extinction Rebellion really, but I'm sort of in contact with some of the members and witnessing their journey, and it's very beautiful to see this mass movement decide to rest and connect within. And I find it really exciting. And I think that it's not just about recharging our energy so that we have the fuel to continue. I think it's about the process of evolution. Mm-hmm. And that that the way that we have to be careful that if we want change, that we're really inviting change, and we're not doing things in the same way that they always have been done.
Yeah.
And so this sense of in the past we thought that change happens through force, and the more force we apply, the more change happens. And of course change can happen through force, but I think we're having a kind of collective awakening around the fact that change also happens in more mysterious and subtle ways, because everything is all interconnected. And
perhaps that we also want to change that method of forcing things to happen, that's one of the changes that we're wanting, right? That's the big complaint that I have about a lot of things, is that it's achieved through force. A lot of things are achieved through dominating things and forcing things, and I feel like we'd be better off if we were connected with this mystery, this more subtle way.
But perhaps there's two, and maybe I'm not going to use the most eloquent way of describing this, but perhaps there are two kind of energetic sort of approaches to life, and one is more of a top down and one is more of a bottom up, and they both have beauty and power, and they both need each other. Mm-hmm. So if you have top down without any connection to bottom up, you're going to create potential destruction. They need each other. Maybe does that sound very mysterious? Do you have an idea as to what I'm speaking about?
It does. I'm curious what you mean by top down and bottom up.
Yeah, so top down is when, for example, I make a decision based on my mind or my will to, an action comes from that. So I'm using my mind or my will to decide to move my body in a certain way, let's say, or to decide to do something in the world. I'm just going to make it happen. I'm going to use my will. I'm going to use my, as opposed to coming into a kind of receptive state and then allowing my body to move on its own. So perhaps both are important ways of being in the world, to harness both ways of being. But if we have one without the other, either it's flat or it's power over, which is, in a disconnected way.
Mm-hmm. That makes more sense the way you describe it, and especially when you said the part about then we have power over, because for me, a key point in having that intrinsic wisdom and then that logical thinking, decision-making process, having those work in harmony requires a harmonious relationship between those different ways of knowing and understanding and deciding and taking action. So it's we know that the womb space has a direct connection to the brain and vice versa through a particular physiological nerve connection, right? And that if that is disrupted or underdeveloped, that connection, because we're taught to disregard or suppress womb wisdom impulses throughout our life and to only value brain logical thinking impulses throughout our life, then we have a domination of that type of knowing and understanding over this other lower down womb-centered knowing and understanding. And there needs to be I feel reestablishing of harmonious partnership between all the different ways of knowing and understanding. And then we've got the heart in the middle that has a way of knowing and understanding as well. And we can find so many ways and discover so many ways that these different centers of knowing and understanding and deciding about how we're moving through the world, they get disconnected from each other. And that shows up in our relationships, and that shows up in our, you know, social structures and all of that. And so reforging and reworking those connections and creating harmonious partnership everywhere instead of domination of one over the other, it seems really important. I could go on.
And that is massively paradigm shifting.
Yes.
It's a massive cultural shift. We are redefining what intelligence is. You know, because the way that we live, we think of intelligence as being something that lives up here. And it's about our capacity for kind of abstract reasoning and sort of distancing ourselves from something and understanding it and understanding the parts. Mm-hmm. And so by like coming into our bodies and our wombs, we start realizing that, yeah, intelligence, everything we've been taught about intelligence is completely wrong. And perhaps intelligence has to do with being in relationship with the world, and through sort of dropping our awareness into our wombs and into our bodies. You know, even I love how Philip Shepherd, he's one of my heroes, he talks about how we're so used to this phrase like, I have a body, or listen to your body. But that is also coming from this kind of top down, you know, my identity is up here, I have a body down there. You know, what if I'm listening to the world through my body? What if I am a body instead of I just have a body? And, you know, that I think just completely transforms our experience of what it is to be a human in the world, and how it is to feel part of the world.
Well, just thank you so much. That is just a lovely note to bring us to that fundamental shift of, instead of I have a body or I'm listening to my body, I am a body and I'm listening to the world through my body. Such a profound shift. And I just want to thank you for that. And it's the same with the womb awareness, right? I am, you know, are we listening to our womb, or are we listening through our womb, right? Are we using our womb to do such and such, or are we creating through our womb? Are we activating our intrinsic womb abilities? Are we allowing them to, see, it's hard to wrap the words around and really find that place of centering directly from there and saying, are we residing? Are we being a womb-centered being? So obviously we can evolve more into this. So I really want to thank you, Ruby. And so is there a place that folks can find your work easy to say on the video and in the audio?
Yeah, so my website is alchemy-eros.com.
Okay.
Or you can just Google Ruby May and you'll find me. Although I believe Ruby May is also a patented peach, I believe.
You're a
and a beauty parlor in Wimbledon, but somewhere on Google you'll see my website.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, I would love to be mistaken for a patented peach. That's lovely. So wonderful. So are there any last notes or words that are coming through for you to share with us today?
just appreciating this moment of stillness after all these words with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been a treasure to exchange ideas and dreams and listen to you and share from myself. And yeah, I hope that what we generated is of value or inspiration to others. And thank you for your work. Thank you for building all these bridges. I imagine that you have such a wealth of amazing connections to all these cool people all over the world. So I honor the role that you're playing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely building. I'm very grateful for everyone that's participating here. And for listeners who want to learn more about the Womb-Centered Healing Temple, which is this sort of collective space that I've been guided to build and grow by bringing all of these wonderful people to come talk on the podcast and potentially offer courses or be guest instructors in my programs, and create this web around the whole planet that I feel the real purpose of the internet originally and ultimately is by helping us to reweave this web of vitality and life-giving human awareness and harmony around the world. So that's what I'm participating in. And so come and look at my website too if you want to learn more about what's happening there at wombcenteredhealing.com. So thank you so much, Ruby, and thank you, listeners. Until next time, that's all for now.